I'm Kate Carter, and I'm right now the Acting Associate Vice President of Teaching and Learning. I look after a wide variety of things, but one of the key things that we do within the Center for Teaching Innovation and Excellence is try to encourage faculty to think about new things they can try in their classroom, give them support to take risks, to experiment, to find out what's working well and not working well in their classroom.
So how do I build trust with my students in the classroom? One of the things that I rely on a lot is humor, and particularly self-deprecating humor. I find works really well because students, feel this sense of hierarchy, and if you can break that down a little bit, that helps.
I think to build a trust in a classroom that size requires me to let them know that I feel vulnerable as well as they. So I admit to my mistakes.
So first day of class, what I do is I go around and I talk to students about their experiences, what they hope to achieve during the semester. And we also go around and we talk about what do we need to ensure that the space is safe and is brave for students. So we co-construct expectations and goals for the class.
I start off my course by talking to the students about how I always like to try new things every term, how I really value their feedback. So I do a welcome survey in the very first class where I ask the students to let me know what they hope to get out of the course. I ask them how excited they are, how interested, how nervous, things like that.
I think that the trust could be built partially by the act of taking risks. But that, on your side, taking risks means they're a little more open to something different happening. You got to start on day one, and you put it in, and you plan it, and you work it out, and you make that space for people to take a little few minutes to be leery and then start to warm up.
Teaching day this year was very different from previous years. We weren't listening to colleagues talk about what they do and why they do it. Instead, we worked with a choreographer and a clown from Cirque du Soleil, and it was really about embodiment and body awareness, about performance in teaching and performance in delivery, as well as pushing a little bit outside our comfort zones. And so we did a lot of very active activities where we were skipping around and we were going behind a curtain and coming out and saying something to our peers. There was some singing involved. So there were lots of opportunities for people to go outside their comfort zones and think about how they can teach in the moment, and that idea of improv.
So Debra Brown is a world-renowned and Emmy Award-winning choreographer. The story of her life is that she grew up in Brantford, Ontario, and went on to Montreal, where she met up with a fellow, and together they managed to create the basis of Cirque du Soleil. So she was the first and has remained the primary choreographer for Cirque du Soleil. And then René Bazinet, René was introduced to me for the first time that day, and he was someone that she knew, and he's a world-renowned clown who has been in many of the Cirque du Soleil productions.
Do you ever go to the classroom and you feel uneasy and you don't feel totally present, and then things don't quite work the way you want? Do you ever feel a little in conflict what you're going to deliver that day? But if we are present, if we root ourselves into the ground, relax our legs. Somebody once said to me, people come to witness presence. I think that must be true, even in the classroom.
I was at first a little intimidated, but then we did a lot of warm-up exercises, and through that process, I went from feeling a sense of discomfort to comfort.
There are people who have done more of that kind of thing, and they jumped in and did some of it. I think there were some other faculty who jumped in and did some things where I don't think it's their natural inclination, but more they're a good citizen, and so they're looking for volunteers. I'll step forward and do this. And then there were other people who quite clearly said, this isn't what I really wanted to do. There was one clear example where someone was asked to sing and they just said no.
You really did have this up and down roller coaster of different feelings and emotions. But I think that's part of performing.
This is fidgety. Fidgety is really making you very weak. I'm an expert in movement, and in movement, the first thing I learned that the non-movement is the most powerful. It's the most powerful way to deliver anything, is to not move, right? Just to talk, and not to move too much. But you can move, of course. But when you do move, you do it express, and not just by chance. You understand?
For me, the easiest takeaways for the classroom were reflections on how I present myself. One thing that Renee highlighted was that using the space of a classroom, that movement isn't just about how you move. It's also about how and when you don't move. And that has made me reflect upon the way I use a lecture space. You need a balance between that movement and stream of thought and the silences. It's like a painting. You need those empty spaces to emphasize the forms or whatever, the colors that you're expressing yourself with.
I think one of the big takeaways that I had after the teaching day morning was that even though I lament about my big classes of 36 students, which is really quite unmanageable and the kind of thing that I teach, there are ways to get them up and moving. Even if I have them stand in a new place or sit in a new place, shake them up a little bit. Give them the unexpected. Expect them to expect the unexpected from me.
I think that it helps to remind me that I need to let my students own their discomfort, and I need to make sure they know that not only is it okay, but it's supposed to be uncomfortable, and make sure that there are continual opportunities for stepping out of their comfort zone so that when they reach a point of being ready, that readiness is aligned with an opportunity to come out of their comfort zone and feel safe and secure doing that.
Our fears why we don't take risks. It's a continuous momentous thing that we deal with every day, and as long as we plant, then you are free to explore without judgment. And that's so important.
What I took away from it was, given the opportunity to work with someone in sort of a performance coaching type environment, I could become much better at presenting than I am right now. There's a lot that I haven't thought about. There's a lot that I don't think about on a day-to-day basis. One of the things that comes out of it is there's people that are going to engage in very different ways, and people who want to engage in very different ways. And that it's important to recognize if someone doesn't want to engage, there's a reason they don't want to engage. And you have to decide fairly quickly, especially in that kind of setting, okay, is this something I can get past with one sentence? And if it's not, just move on to the next thing. And we'll come back to this particular person later and try. Especially when in a classroom setting where you have 12 weeks.
What's the most important thing you bring to a creation? Your intuition. We developed the courage to make a sharp right, even though we were planning to go straight or left, because of the nature of here and now. And in order to do that, we had to risk every single day. Franco used to sit everyone down and say, each day I come in here with my pants down. I have no idea. And he would just share that he was just as afraid. But we developed the courage to not know and keep on pushing.
I did something in my class yesterday that was not exactly what we did in the workshop, but it was something similar. And I warned them a little bit about this ahead of class. I said, in our second break, we're gonna do something fun, but you're gonna have to move, and you're just gonna have to trust me, okay? And so they knew something was coming, they didn't know what, so I put on the music, and I went out in the middle of class. I said, okay, everyone up. And then I had them doing aerobics left and right, and then hands on the hips, and let's get those hips moving. And I was really surprised, actually, with how well they played along. So that break only lasted maybe a minute and a half. But when that break was over, you could feel the change in the energy in the room, and That gave us what we needed to get through the last 15 minutes of that material. That was risk-taking for me, and then they were willing to meet me halfway and take the risks themselves to stand up and go along. So
I think that the way material's presented, the same words, the same message, is received very differently depending on the delivery. And if I want the students to be excited about it, I need to be excited about it. And I think I generally am. But thinking in terms of performance, I think can help me to polish that delivery. I really liked the analogy of teaching with your pants around your ankles. And that's something that I think I can use in terms of that exact phrasing. I can say those words to my students to make them understand that I am putting myself out there.
Another thing that they talked about was feeling that at the end of the day, in 3 months, a student is not going to remember what they learned, but they're going to remember how they felt in that space. So what I took from that is, how do we create a space where we can use feeling and a sense of eagerness and comfort and bravery and courage to make learning really, really fun. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to take a risk because this day is all about risks. So what I did the following week was I teach a couple courses on social justice, social work as transformative action. So I put on Bob Marley and I said, okay, time to stand up, because I said, this song is about social justice. This is about human rights. And in a class of 56, I got a bunch of students up and dancing. And I said to the ones that didn't want to dance, that were too self-conscious, well then think of it as a 7th inning stretch. So the whole point is, let's get engaged with ourselves and with others, and some started dancing together, and it really fostered this fantastic sense of community.
I did start off early on. The day right after the workshop, I started when I lectured on Monday, I tried to implement a little bit of the performance aspect, trying to grab their attention and then moving on. It's difficult because a lot of the first year and second year classes are large classes where you've got theater style seating, or they're in a large area over there and you're a small one single person up at the front. So entire classroom design, it doesn't really lend itself to something that isn't a lecture. And you think that you can't do anything interactive like that. You're not going to know most of their names by the end of the term, but you could learn some of them. You're not going to be able to really remember a lot of the interactions, but you can build memorable moments in a class of any size. Some people think that the administration doesn't want us to take those kinds of risks. Or I think that some professors in their career, maybe earlier in their career, think they don't want to take those risks because even part-time faculty members such as myself, they are perhaps trying to get a better position at the university, so they don't want to hurt their careers or stuff like that. So professors don't want to do something that's uncomfortable, fearing that it might have some sort of backlash.
This is frightening. I know, they're weird. Everybody's different. But then you ask, what are you curious about? You see what I mean? You can put the stress in many, it's beautiful work with the voice. What are you curious about? What are you curious about? What are you curious about? What are you curious about?
The word performance can be viewed a number of different ways, but I think as instructors, we are maybe not obliged, but I think obliged to think about our role as a performer in front of the class. Because we're not just delivering material. We're supposed to deliver material in a way that students think and are engaged and want to come back for more. We're delivering material and helping people want to learn material who learn in many different ways. And so the movement of an instructor at the beginning, at the front of the class, can help with that. They'll remember the movement.
When you really think about the fact that, okay, the way I stand up here and deliver this material affects whether other people hear it. And if it affects whether they hear it and engage with it, then performance is part of what we do. It is just part of what we do. And it's something that most faculty can get better at. I had a professor in a third year class, and he literally read the textbook. He read the textbook from page 1 to page 400 for the 12 weeks of the term. It's impossible to sit and listen to that. And for most of us, unless we came out of performing arts kind of PhD, we don't get any training in how to present, how to stand in front of a room of 400 people and be heard. How do you alter pace? How do you manage that classroom so that everybody is getting the most they can out of that class? I think we are performing, whether faculty like it or not.
In order to get people engaged in material, they have to be interested or turned on. And if the material's not going to turn them on immediately, because as an instructor, I know that the material's important, and I know that it could fire them up if given at the right time or at the right place. So you have to use other techniques that can turn on the students if it's not going to be primarily the material at first.
So after a while, I got bored with my own work. So I had to come up with this weird psychology. I said, okay, I really don't know if there's going to be a show tomorrow. I really do not know that. I don't even know if I'm going to get run over by a car tomorrow. If I'm lying in hospital tomorrow morning, I want to be able to say I did the best show I ever did. Ever. Because the people who come and see us, they see us for the first and the last time. Usually. It's the one-time deal. It's always that one-time deal.
I'd like to take the time, after one of these workshops, to sit down with someone and have kind of like this conversation, but say, okay, what can I actually try to implement? Now let's think about my course next semester. Let's plan, where can I implement these? And then let's videotape those so that I can then reflect on how did that work? And that sort of systematic thing, I think, is really necessary to take full advantage of these opportunities to increase innovation and excellence in teaching.
I feel that that's a discussion that it would be really beneficial to continue. How do we do this in a way that there's a sense of contentment and excitement and energy in the room, knowing that some students are really going to love this and others might not. I think there really is a role for where can I take improv classes? I want to learn how to do this because I do see direct relevance to how to use this in the classroom.
Looking back, there were pieces of it that I think were very useful. I was never sure what the intention of what I was getting out of it was. The other thing is that first year course is critically important to progression for about 1,500 of the 1,800 students. All the business students, all the economic students have to take it in order to keep going in their program. And so if we introduce something that just doesn't work, that just causes all kinds of problems at a sort of deeper program level that we are concerned about. So I think we try and introduce innovative elements, but we're doing it very methodically and very carefully.
I'm trying to be more aware of my body and how my body can be a distraction to the message that I'm trying to convey. And also, the learning isn't only from the doing. And this was something that I saw, I think, on teaching day. Sometimes someone who's less comfortable with a particular activity can learn a lot by observing their peers and colleagues. If we can think about how our classroom can be structured to help them move beyond their comfort zone, but also give them opportunities to learn through observing others' engagement, then we're providing a lot of value for different types of students.
I feel like it's like a vacation, taking a vacation. When you go 2 weeks on a vacation, you come back refreshed and you get all this energy. And all of a sudden your teaching goes very quick, very easy, because you got this beautiful energy going, right? Because you took a break. And I think these kind of classes are to take a break from the self.
I would say it was a success. I would wish that we had had a little more time to debrief at that moment, have a more robust conversation at the end about what just happened, how can we digest that, and how can we use it in our classrooms. So the feedback, it's been interesting. People loved it, and there were people who didn't love it. And I think that's telling as well, right? And it happens in a classroom too, that you're going to sometimes find people who aren't comfortable with where you're going and people who embraced it wholeheartedly. Even the people who didn't love it, they understood what we were trying to do with the day. And I'm excited to think that this conversation that we're now having can be part of that next step to say, okay, where else do we need to go? What else do we need to talk about in relation to this, to this possibility of using improv to think about what you can get done in the classroom?